So I'll call the regular meeting of April 24, 2024 Board of Education to order. I acknowledge for all of us that we're meeting this evening on the traditional lands and territories of the WSÁNEĆ people who have lived, learned, worked, played, and stewarded the land since millennia, and we offer this acknowledgement as a gesture towards reconciliation of our communities. I wish to welcome members of the management team, Superintendent Eberwin, Secretary Treasurer Reed, Assistant Superintendent McKenzie, Director Hunter online, and thank you, and Director Westhaver here. I also welcome members, representatives of our education partner groups, representing QP 441, President Candace Whitney, representing the Confederation of Parent Advisory Councils of SANEJ, Jen, welcome, Jen Wanless. Representing the Administrators Association, Ms. Kim Graves, welcome. And representing the SANEJ Teachers Association, again on Teams, Don Peterson. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda, trustees? Trustee McMurphy, second by Trustee Vandal. Trustee Vanwell, you have a late item to propose that we add?
Yes, under number 13 reports from trustee representatives, I'd like to report on police week.
Police
week.
Great, thank you. That'll be the fourth item then. Are there any other late items or additions, trustees? All in favor of the agenda as amended? Any opposed? Thank you. The motion is carried. Prior to the regular meeting, the board held an in-camera meeting and discussed personnel matters, business affairs, and facilities. We'll now proceed to consider the minutes of the board of the meeting of March 13, 2024. Are there any errors or omissions to the minutes of March 13, 2024? Hearing none, I declare that those meetings be adopted as circulated. There's no business arising from the minutes of which I'm aware. There are no presentations, but this is an opportunity now for the public and members of our partner groups to ask any questions they may have. If you do, raise your hand or your yellow hand if you're on the screen. Thank you. Not seeing any, we'll proceed with the agenda. That takes us to item 6, which is the report of the chair. And first of all, I wish to welcome us back from the spring break and the school closure for over 2 weeks, as it turned out. And I trust that the time off aligned with some warmth and some sunshine for all of us, and perhaps enjoyment of spring flowers and growth. And in any case, whether you traveled or hiked or gardened or yard worked or spent time with family and friends, pursued interests, I trust that it was a refreshing perspective, a rest, an opportunity to recharge and renew as we carry on to the end of the school year and the celebrations of success and accomplishment that we'll see in June. On April 11th, some of the board, along with Superintendent Eberwin, attended the official opening of the Individual Learning Center Hairstylists course. Some were treated to complimentary scalp massages. I've never seen my friends look so relaxed as after that session. ILC generally, and this program in particular, of course, has such significance for the students who might otherwise not have had the opportunity to succeed in a field or obtain the education that they wanted. I recall at the past 2 ILC graduations, Trustee McMurphy's comments about the critical role that ILC plays and provides for those students. And I remember Trustee Silsbury's remarks at the last graduation of the hairstylist class, consistent with that theme of their significance in their chosen field. And so in pursuing the board's mandate, we're always pleased to express our support for the events and achievements of the students at IFC, and appreciation for the staff that guide them to those successes. Similarly, trustees have been engaged in adjudicating grade 12 capstone projects in preparation for graduation requirements at our neighborhood secondary schools. These are rare opportunities to meet and appreciate the students' efforts and success on an individual basis. Trustees invariably come away from these impressed by those presentations, and I am always disappointed if my schedule does not permit me to participate in those opportunities. Turning to advocacy, we'll recall that at our March meeting, the board resolved to ask 8 other districts, school districts, in similar circumstances in terms of low or stable enrollment growth and financial constraints to sign a joint letter advocating to the Ministry of Education and Child Care for funding for unfunded inflationary costs causing such budget difficulties to our district and to these, may I call them partner districts. We've received positive responses from both, from most. These are the ones, as I understand it, who are in with us, either by confirmation through correspondence or through speaking with me at the BCSDA AGM. West Vancouver, Cowichan, Peace River North, Okanagan, Skaha, and us, of course, Saanich, are there. Vernon is holding their board meeting tonight, and I anticipate they'll be considering our request then, and hopefully it's positive. We have not heard from the Sea to Sky, and we have heard from Southeast Kootenay, but we need to follow up for clarification. The inference I've drawn is that they are supportive, but it wasn't as clear as it might be. We have also heard, I've also discussed the situation with the chair of the Campbell River Board, which I reported on at the Vista Business Meeting, BCSDA AGM, and they applaud our efforts, but will not be joining us and regret that they can't because they've just received some substantial funding from the ministry, which the chair was at a loss to explain both as to amount and as to process. But they're reluctant to look a gift horse in the mouth on one hand and turn around and then say that it's now more. So it looks like most likely we'll have 7 of the 8 with us. In addition to that, Carolyn Brody, who's the chair of the West Vancouver Board and the president, of course, of the BC School Trustees Association, and I've reported, I think, in ad hoc to trustees about this before this evening, has received a signal from the ministry that while the Ministry of Education and Child Care is largely on side with the concern, they have to deal with the Minister of Finance and Treasury Board. And so the signal to Ms. Brody and the request she's made of our partners, including us, is that we each individually send a letter, as well as the joint letter, to both the Minister of Education and Child Care and Minister of Finance, outlining these issues. And so I have circulated, I think yesterday, the draft letter from the West Vancouver Board of Education, which covers much of the same territory. And then I conclude the report. I'll invite a motion if trustees choose, directing the board to send a similar letter on behalf of Saanich alone to those 2 ministries. In terms of budget development and its continuing consultation process, excuse me, a summary includes the following. The Budget Advisory Committee met under the chairmanship of Trustee Elder on April 11th. The Saanich community consultation occurred in part through meeting with the Saanich School Board on April 17. The public budget community meeting occurred that evening, April 17 as well. Student voice in our secondary schools has been held in part and continues this week and ongoing, and the online survey closes on April 29. So I wish on behalf of us all to express thanks again to Secretary Treasurer Reid and to the Finance Department for the expertise in designing and leading this consultation process, and particularly for the presentations that he makes at all of these sessions. Last week, most of us were able to attend the BC School Trustees Association Annual General Meeting in Vancouver. The theme was Dream Big, Lead Strong, and Superintendent Everlin accompanied us. There'll be more about this from our provincial councillor, Trustee Manuel, and reports from trustee representatives. And there'll be a report as well from Trustee Hickman on the Vista business meeting that occurred at 7:30 a.m. on Friday at the AGM as well. I hardly probably need to mention the official opening of the Shashisha Early Learning Nature-Based Childcare Center, which occurred yesterday morning on site. It was a wonderful opportunity to celebrate a tremendous success that was a long time coming. And an exciting climax to the donation by Mr. Turgoose 150 years ago. The celebration acknowledged importantly the Indigenous connection to this site. And we were honored by the presence of descendants of Mr. Turgoose, Peter Turgoose, and members of the Mitchell family who are prominent in the Central Sandwich area as well, and are very supportive. The Minister of State for Childcare, Mr. Dean, was present as well. And so this is such a significant initiative for Peninsula families and students and the community to help improve lives for many years. It's been a long process, 8 years of consultation and work. Well, I've said this before, and I said it yesterday publicly again. I wish and need to particularly express the board's appreciation to Secretary Treasurer Reid, his expertise and his leadership in the consultation process, and stick handling this project step by step, day by day, and year by year to its fruition yesterday. So as I understand it, the facility will be open May 1, and we are in a very celebratory mood for that will last quite some time. If you'll permit me a personal note, which relates to yesterday's event, peripherally, that broadly relates to the work we do. Had I not been present at the official opening yesterday, I would have been in Kamloops as a invited guest for the investiture of Dee Dee DeRose as Chancellor of Thompson Rivers University. Dee Dee DeRose and I met some years ago when we were both appointed to a provincial educational organization where we served for about 8 years, and we've remained close friends. She is Indigenous, and she grew up in the Caribou and Williams Lake area. And of course, as a Kamloops teacher and administrator over the years, she's been very connected to the Kamloops Indigenous communities as well. And so the significance of this is that she is dedicated to bringing that perspective, her background and the connection with indigeneity, to her role as Chancellor. It's an honor. It's a timely, and we can expect good things from her. And if I couldn't be there, because we were quite properly celebrating our own event, externally and remotely, we celebrate her appointment as an Indigenous Chancellor of Homeland Interior Universities. And so I appreciate it. Thank you, trustees. That completes the report from the chair, and before we move to the report from the superintendent, is there a motion arising from my suggestion that the board send a letter? Trustee Elder.
We have to place that motion on the floor, Chair, of your wording.
Thank you. So Trustee Elder moves. Is there a seconder? And the thrust of it, Trustee Vandal, and the thrust of it will be that this board send its own letter to the Minister of Education, Childcare, and the Minister of Finance outlining the unfunded inflationary costs and funding model issues that we are also conversant with. Thank you. Is there any further discussion about that? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. The motion is carried. And we'll move to then the superintendent's report as item 7.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This time of year is a little bit different than some other years where we have a provincial election on the horizon coming up. And the spring session will be the last session for bills to be passed before they go into the summer recess, and then the rate is dropped in September. So there's been a bit of a flurry of activity from the Ministry of Education over the last little while, and from the legislature around certain bills and regulations that have been put forward. And I thought it would be prudent to take a bit of time just to review some of the things that have already come forward, where we are in that process, and some new expectations that are coming out that need to be fulfilled this springtime as well, to give the board a bit of information as to where we are in that. And in addition, I have an update for the board around the board's request to meet with the Wasanum School Board on a retreat, and we can talk a little bit about that as well. So as we look ahead in the next few months, just recently the legislature passed Bill 22, the Safe Access to Schools Act, and I will spend a little bit of time talking about that. There's also been some clarification around personal digital devices, which has been referred to as the cell phone restrictions, but it really is around personal digital devices in schools, and I'll give an update as to where we are in that process. You will recall back in January, I presented on Bill 40, the School Amendment Act. I have an update on the progress of where we are in the implementation of that. And finally, as I said, I'll talk a little bit about a meeting that Principal Austin and I had with the CEO of the school board, Caleb Child, and some initial thoughts around when this might happen and potential discussion topics for the board. If we take a look at the Bill 22 Safe Access to Schools Act, this is proposed bubble zone legislation that has been introduced to the legislature but has not been enacted into law. And it has been created in response to recent disruptive protests at many schools and school districts around the province. We haven't seen any of those here on the peninsula, but there have been quite a few throughout the province. I believe at last count there have been 18 such protests around the province, protesting a number of different content areas. This legislation, if approved into law, would prohibit behavior that impedes access to school grounds, disrupts school programs or activities, and causes concern for physical or mental safety of students and staff. It would give police the authority to arrest or issue tickets on site to anyone found impeding the access, disrupting activities, or attempting to intimidate people within 20 meters of school property. We currently have, through the School Act, Section 177, some authority within the schools and school district to deal with persons that are disruptive on school property or that refuse to leave if they have been so directed by an administrative officer. This is, as I said, Section 177. This Bill 22 Safe Access to Schools Act goes beyond that ability, and it provides police with tools on site and at the time to intervene if necessary to prevent the disruption or intimidation of others. Section 177 simply directs school administrators, through approval from the superintendent's office, to issue no trespass letters. And a copy is forwarded to the police so that any subsequent actions could be dealt with through a potential arrest or issuing of a fine at that point in time. So following Section 177, we received guidance a number of years ago from the province around what that looks like, and AP 156 Maintenance of Order outlines the specific procedures as to how we use that tool within our tool chest to make sure the schools are as safe as possible. I anticipate that Bill 22 will probably ascend in the next few weeks, probably before summer recess, and then we'll receive additional information from the ministry as to how that parlays itself into how we might operationalize that if necessary here, not only in Saanich, but obviously throughout other school districts. Personal digital devices. The Ministry of Education and Childcare has amended the provincial standards for codes of conduct order, that will promote some consistency among school districts in their expectations of restricting student personal device use in schools, and particularly during instructional time. The term cell phone isn't used, but personal devices, it could be iPads, it could be cell phones, it could be some other digital device 2 years from now as it's being invented. It's about the distraction of digital devices in students' hands and what that looks like. The goals of this are several. One, to restrict student use of personal devices to promote online safety and to support focused learning environments. That the guidelines be age appropriate. That the guidelines address the use of digital devices for instructional purposes and digital literacy. This is a very important consideration. It's not about banning devices, but it's about how we use them appropriately and how we use them appropriate at various age levels. Our guidelines, our code of conduct must address allowing students accessibility, accommodation, as well as for medical and health needs. So an accommodation might be something like speech-to-text software that a student requires for their learning. Health needs might be glucose monitoring and the necessity to have a digital device at all times with them. So they'd be very careful in the crafting of this change to make sure that students' access to their educational program in a health and safe way is maintained. It's also to address any equity concerns to support learning outcomes. So for example, if a child does not have Wi-Fi access at home, if they don't have a device at home to use, that there is accommodation made for that child to access the digital device in the learning environment that might go outside of the general expectations for the student population. Again, with an eye on individual differences to make sure that their accessibility to an educational program is maintained. So our mandate in the next very short while is to update our code of conduct. And the board remember that we have 3 separate codes of conduct for elementary, middle, and secondary schools. So we will be updating our code of conduct to reflect these requirements and these expectations from the provincial standards. And in all likelihood, we'll probably have a new AP as well that'll come as an information item to the board, most likely at the June meeting. That will be more general in scope, with more specific language addressed within the code of conduct as required through the provincial standards that have been updated. Mr. McKenzie is our lead on this and has been working with a group of administrators to date. I've already been in contact with COPAX. We'll be sharing the information at the May 9th, I think it is COPAX meeting, Jen. And we'll also be working with the STA on this as well too. It is a short time period turnaround, but the good news is that we have specific guidelines and language that we need to be implementing. And it's important to note that we're not turning the apple cart upside down. We already have general procedures in place for all 3 school levels. And what we're really doing now is just putting those expectations clearly communicated in language that will be front and center. So you can expect to see something in the next couple of months. Bill 40, the School Amendment Act, you'll recall there are 3 parts to this. When I presented on it in January, that there needs to be a local education agreement language in place, that it provides priority enrollment for Indigenous students who live on reserve, and that there needs for boards to create an Indigenous Education Council in each school district that is organized and includes members from the local First Nations communities on reserve. We have a local education agreement. We have already started priority enrollment, and you may recall that we don't anticipate that being any issue. We've always been able to accommodate students on reserve into their school of choice. We are still waiting for information on the Indigenous Education Council. We are working with a local First Nation, but the province is still liaising with FNESC, the First Nations Educational Steering Committee at the provincial level, and we're still waiting for guidelines on what the IEC will look like and how it should be implemented. You will see on the next slide when I talk about the board-to-board retreat, one of the topics that we've been talking about with the nation is perhaps having Bill 40 as an agenda item for a retreat when we get together to figure out what that looks like. Because we still don't have the expectations around how it's to be put in place. So Melissa Austin and I and a representative from the nation will be at the jointly convened annual meeting in Vancouver on May the 9th. So Jen, I won't be at the COPAX meeting that night. Mr. McKenzie and Mr. Westhaver will be talking about personal digital devices. We hope to be getting an update at that time around Bill 30. That's still a couple of weeks away, and we'll see what kind of progress they make at the provincial level.
Superintendent Trustee McMurphy has a question relating to this.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just wondering, the requirement to have an Indigenous Education Council, has the ministry indicated who will be funding these new councils?
I would defer to the Secretary of Treasury. We have received some implementation money from the IEC already, but we haven't relied to any of it yet. But I'll defer to the Secretary of Treasury for the amount.
Through the chair, the ministry has confirmed funding for all school districts, for the same school district, for the establishment of IECs, and the funding confirmed for our district is it's around $80,000 to $90,000.
And that's to support the council doing its work through 1 year, establishing and doing for 1 year, and then is there an expectation that the funding will continue?
I believe so.
That's the expectation. The anticipated use of it, again, we're still looking for the guidelines, but the anticipated use would be travel, could be a combination of our meeting in Vancouver, it could be food, it could be release time for teachers to join, it could be all of those types of things.
Even though it was another task for us to do without the resources to
That's
support it.
So if I may, Superintendent, just following Trustee McMurphy's question. Am I correct that the Indigenous Education Council is not a district body, but you're charged with funding it?
The Indigenous Education Council, through legislation, is mandated for public boards of education to form. So we must create the indebted, and I believe that's being done because of the authority that the Ministry of Education has over public boards of education, but not individual nations or their school boards. So the authority rests within our jurisdiction, but the ownership of the council, the populating of the council, the decisions made by the council are done wholly by First Nations membership. So voting is done only through First Nations representatives. They may invite staff or trustees to sit with them on council, but they do not have any voting rights. We are anticipating clarity around things such as the Indigenous targeted funding. It is anticipated that the IEC will have decision-making authority over the targeted funding that the district spends on Indigenous programming here. But those nuances and those details about how that works is still.
Trustee Elder.
Thank you. On that theme, through you, Superintendent, I expect that there will already have been pretty extensive discussions at the provincial level and locally around the ways that the creation of the IEC can step away from the colonial approach in the legislation, which is to form or create the committee, the council. And it didn't say to work with First Nations to ensure that a council is created. It said the district will form it or create it, whatever the words were. Has there been some pushback from Finesk or First Nations saying, you know, what Chair Dunford spoke to, which is the requirement that it be formed by the district, which doesn't seem very respectful. And I understand your explanation that it's a statutory authority that government has with school boards, but not with First Nations, but it still seems a little bit disrespectful. So you'll form a council and invite membership from the nation. Is that a topic of conversation at all? Is that a sensitivity? Or is it I'm just making some ado about nothing?
Superintendent.
My understanding is that is not a particular issue with Finesse or the First Nations. I think it is around the role and the functioning of the IEC versus how it was created or composed. I think my understanding is there is agreement that it was composed of First Nations representatives and not representatives from the local public school boards. I don't believe that. I certainly haven't heard that as a concern coming forward at this point.
Yes, thank you.
The last item, and the board will be very well aware of this, when we met with our senior school board colleagues on the LEA earlier this year, that there is a request and agreement from the senior school board to have a retreat. Principal Austin and myself met with CEO Caleb Child. He has received word from his board that they are indeed interested in having a retreat and proposed Thursday, August 29th in the afternoon. It would include a meal. It would include a number of topics that could be agreed upon. The understanding was that we would meet off-site. It wouldn't be on school district property. It would not be on in any of the villages. That it would be somewhere else on the peninsula that we would meet and gather and have an opportunity to learn more about each other. I'm throwing the date out here not as a confirmed date, but as a date that I'm hoping trustees would be able to take a look to see if that's something that would work. From an operational perspective, staff would make that work if that works for this board and for the Salish board. It is a challenge the Thursday before school opens for a half day for all of us to be sequestered for that amount of time as we're trying to get the school district up and running. But if that's a date that is agreed upon, then we would certainly find our way to make it work, and maybe staff would come in and out of the meeting. In our conversation with Caleb, he felt quite strongly that all senior staff from both boards should be there to help support the board if there are questions or operational implications. And so it would be my anticipation that the entire executive team would participate. If it was that Thursday, we might have to extricate ourselves every now and then to make sure that the district gets up and running, but we would make ourselves available for that. Before we talk about the data, I do want to go over just the topics to give you an idea about what was discussed. Again, Bill 40 implementation, we might hopefully have some more clarification. It might be a great opportunity for that board-to-board interaction to talk about what an IEC could look like. Perhaps there might be an interest from the nation to relook at the LEA in terms of a different model. And I think it could be an interesting opportunity to really have some robust conversation around what Bill 40 is and at that point in time. There's a request that it'd be great to have a review of Indigenous student demographics and their achievement trends over time. I think that would be an interesting setting the stage of discussion as to where we are, where we've been, where we are, and where we'd like to go. Certainly, that would be a presentation that staff could certainly pull together. Interestingly, the Wasanich School Board is undergoing its own strategic plan renewal this spring, and they hope to have one before the summer comes. I thought it would be an interesting conversation for each board chair, for example, to talk about each other's strategic plans and to see where there are points of overlap, where there could be some joint initiatives between the two different jurisdictions, and just have that understanding of each other's plans at a deeper level. And of course, if we're going to talk about the plans, staff could then support what the plans look like in terms of operationalizing them with some of the strategies. And the board is well aware of some of the strategies that we're using, such as the development of a district literacy plan and those types of things to help support the implementation and success of the plan. And we thought that was an interesting agenda summary for the retreat and a chance for the board to get to know each other a bit and to talk about their own work that's going on. But of course, that could all be decided later. Wanted to throw that out as something to think about. But perhaps, Mr. Chair, if we could talk about the date, that's something you're going to have to get back to the nation about early this spring.
Yeah, let's look at that, trustees. This is gratifying because we've been waiting for 3 months to be able to confirm that it will happen and to find a date. I am out of the country on August 29th. I was going to say, carry on without me. So that may be an issue. I don't know what the availability of other trustees are, and I don't know, Superintendent, if there are other dates in September that may better suit staff and certainly me at least. Trustee McMurphy?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I don't know what a better date might be, but what I would be worried about is because of the timing with regard to the startup of our school year and all the mini and major crises that arise as a result of those changes in the situation. I would hate that we would appear disrespectful because our senior staff would legitimately and understandably have to have divided attention. And so I would want the first meeting to start off with possibly, being in a situation where we're creating a bad vibe. So, this is all hypothetical because it may be totally serene and sublime and perfect and nothing will happen and we could possibly have a wonderful board-to-board meeting, but I don't know, but I anticipate that there may be things that will cause that kind of a distraction, and how that would be received, I would hope if it happens, it would be received we would understand those interruptions or distractions or absences or phone calls or whatever. But on the other hand, I'd rather have a situation where we could give our full attention without the possibility of being interrupted or distracted. And I don't know if, I don't want this hesitation to seem like we're reluctant to engage and they've proposed a date and the first thing we say is no. So I don't know what the best approach is, but I would be worried about not being able to be fully present.
What do you think, Superintendent?
From an operational perspective, my preference is not to have it on that date. I think for the reasons that you've outlined. My impression from Caleb is that this is a date that was just proposed, that they would not be offended if we proposed other dates. I think if we could agree on some possibilities that we could perhaps take back to the nation, I could share with Caleb, and he could take to his next board meeting. I don't think that would be received in a negative light, especially since our board chair isn't going to even be available. I think it would be, quite frankly, important for all trustees, but especially Tim, to be present there. I think if any sign that might not be received respectfully would be that our board chair wasn't present.
Trustee Vandal.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is too important initiative not to do it as right as possible and to respect both sides, those nations. School startup is, things happen. And if it's not respectful of our students and staff and our situation, it's not good for the teachers. Likewise, we need to work with WSATH, what works for them, what works for us. We come to an agreement. Let's make it work. Let's have a good start.
Good sentiments, Trustee Vandal. Superintendent, I wonder if the board is generally of that view, that principally because of the pressure on staff and wanting to ensure respect, and also to some degree my unavailability, if we're of the view that an alternate date is better, would it, in terms of logistically setting that, would it make sense for you to propose through Ms. Glancy perhaps to us some dates, and we can get back to her as quickly as possible so that we can deal with it respectfully ourselves?
Absolutely. Does the time work? I think having a meal and then an afternoon together makes good sense. So if we could find a small number of afternoons, probably towards the latter half of September, get the first couple of weeks underneath your belt and get the dust settled, and then have an afternoon with the Saanich board sometime before October begins. and then get back.
Is that agreeable, trustees? Does anyone object to that process? I think we have agreement, Superintendent. Thank you.
Can I get a general feeling, Mr. Chair, around the topics? Are we barking up the right tree here in terms of a potential agenda? Does this resonate with the board, or should we be discussing something different with Caleb as we head towards the more direct planning of the afternoon?
Trustee Vandal again?
Through the chair, what would they suggest at their end? Is this going to be our agenda or their agenda as well?
Well,
It's going to be worked together?
this was generated from Caleb after his conversation with the board and with Melissa and I talking about how we could support this. And so it was actually a shared construction of this agenda, and Caleb left feeling very positive about it. But I said, this is something, I said, I don't make the decision for my board, Caleb. I would need to go back with this and see what their thoughts are on it. I don't think it would be frowned upon if there were other suggestions made, but I just want to make sure that this type of area of focus is something that the board is interested in, or if we are not going in the right direction, and we would take another idea or two back to the nation.
Trustee Silver?
Chair, I think this is really student focused and learning. I think that's what we should be doing. Concentrating on strategic plans and ways in which we can work together to move things along.
I'm sensing a general agreement on this. Whatever you can take from that, Superintendent, are you?
I'm happy to continue to build on this, and as we work with Caleb over the rest of this spring, if there are updates, I can bring that back, certainly around the date. And move forward from there.
And if trustees on reflection have some concrete additional ideas about topics, how would you like to deal with that?
If you can send them to me and copy the rest of the trustees, I think that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and that concludes my report. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Superintendent. There was a lot of meat there. We did have some discussion and questions throughout the report. Are there any, before we move on, any additional comments or questions for the Superintendent? All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Very good. School successes are attached in the board package, trustees, and there are many this month to celebrate. Trustee Hick.
I just wanted to point out that Bayside sent students to the JR Skills Canada Provincials, and they won silver in the sumo bot competition. Don't ask me what a sumo bot is. Couldn't figure that out, but I just wanted to share that. That was great.
It's obviously complex if you don't understand. Good for them.
Must be
Restricted.
Thank you, Trustee Hick. Trustee Silza.
Chair, perhaps we could ask Ms. Graves.
About the sumo bots? They're a lot less complicated than you think. Actually, I think it's one of the initiatives through the district that Darcy supports. So she comes in and works with our teacher in our tech ed department. And honestly, I don't really understand what the sumo bots do, but it's very cool.
Let's go
They're
with
small,
that.
they're not huge, they're actually quite small.
Well, obviously a good thing to succeed at.
Do they have video?
I'm sure they have video. I'm sure they have video.
Any other questions on trustee successes? Do we have those? On school successes.
Move on.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you. Let's move to committee reports. First, the Education Directions Committee with Committee Chair Silzer.
The committee had presentations, two presentations on committee day. The first was the Student Advocates Early Learning Initiatives presentation by Robin Kelly and Jennifer Moore. And we received an update on early learning initiatives. It's good to see how much collaboration is happening within the district, with the nation, and with community partners to strengthen support for early learners. The second presentation was on literacy data information. The presentation was called The First Chapter in Our Data Story. And the presenters were Andreas Klessel, Hardy Hunter, Darcy McNee, and Robin Kelly. And they showed how they're using the available data to actually improve programs and to create greater learning opportunities for a greater number of students. And they highlighted the importance of early intervention, the importance of continuous literacy instruction and support. Apparently, the reading recovery program has been replaced now to not just apply to grade 1 students, but to follow students who need help with literacy beyond grade 1. So they also highlighted the need for intermediate literacy and supporting transitions. And finally, they highlighted continued work to promote equity in access to literacy intervention. We have one item for recommendation, which relates to the local school calendars for 2025-26 and 2026-27. Assistant Superintendent Mackenzie provided us with proposed local calendars for those years. And so the committee recommends, and I, Trustee Sulzer, move that the board forward the draft school calendars for 2025, 2026, and 2026, 2027 for the public consultation for the following dates: April 26th to May 28th, 2024.
Thank you. Second, Trustee Vandal. Do you wish to speak to it further, Trustee Sullivan?
Well, just to say that this comes after a radio consultation with our two adjoining school districts. And it's been carefully planned over the last couple of months. And so the next step, according to the legislation, is we have to consult with the public.
Thank you. Trustees, is there further discussion? I'll put the question on the motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried.
And that concludes our report, Chairman.
Thank you, Trustee Sulzer. Are there any questions or comments for Trustee Sulzer on the report other than the motion? Thank you. We'll proceed then with Finance, Facilities, and Technology with Chair Albert.
Thank you, Chair Dunford. On behalf of the committee, I bring a number of recommendations to the board tonight under 5 separate headings, as you'll see in the report. And we will, as we launch into those, I'll note that all of the supporting documentation for these motions did come through committee last week, has been reviewed by trustees and by staff and by representatives at the committee level, and hopefully by anyone involved tonight through reading these materials. But the Secretary Treasurer stands by to provide clarification on any of these as we put the motions on the floor. The first item was the capital plan bylaw. And the first motion in a set of a few that are intended to move us through 3 readings, as this is a bylaw, if it's the board's wish to adopt tonight. The committee recommends, and I trustee Elder moves that the board approve the first reading of capital plan bylaw number 2024-25-CPSD 6301.
Is there a second? Trustee Vandal, Trustee Elder. Comment? Any discussion, trustees? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
The committee recommends, and I trustee Elder move that the board approve the second reading of the capital plan bylaw number 2024/25-CPSD 6301.
Second, Trustee Hickman. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
The committee recommends, and I trustee Elder move that the board approve the reading of the capital plan bylaw number 2024/25 CPSD 6301 at this board meeting for a third time.
Second, trustee McMurphy and trustee Zipper to move to adopt the bylaw. You recall this has to be accepted, carried unanimously. Is there any discussion on this? All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you, and accordingly, the committee recommends, and I trust you all move that the board approves the third reading, pass and adopt capital project bylaw number 2024/25. It says 15 in the materials, but it's 25 CPSD 6301.
Second, trustee McMurphy, discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried, and the bylaw is adopted.
Thank you. Moving on to the annual facilities grant plan, the materials of which are attached, and this subsequent to some extensive discussion in committee, where I think questions were answered there. The committee recommends, and I trust you all to move that the board approve the 2024/25 annual facility grant plan as presented.
Second. Trustee Vandal. Trustee Elder, any comment? Trustees, any discussion? I'll put the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
The next heading is usage agreements. There are two motions that represent the thinking of the board around proposals for the an agreement for the use of Parkland secondary track by the Peninsula Track and Field Club. The second one being the use of the tennis courts, specifically the pickleball courts on the tennis courts at Stelly Secondary School that came from the Peninsula Community Pickleball Club. And before moving in the direction of these motions, I'd like to ask you, through you, Chair, Secretary Treasurer, if the correspondence from the Recreation Commission regarding a shared use facility study brings information to the board that might affect our consideration of these motions.
Mr. Reid?
Through the chair, yeah, it included in board correspondence is a letter that was received on March 7th from Panorama Recreation. And in that meeting, they requested a meeting with staff, and Director of Facilities Long and myself met with senior staff at Panorama Recreation late last week, and learned more about their plan to create a needs assessment for recreational facilities on the peninsula, and their intention of bringing together Panorama Recreation with municipalities and with the school district to coordinate our collective facilities and ability to provide for recreation opportunities. And so this is a new development, and it's a welcome development, because we have often tried to seek out partnerships with our municipal partners, with Panorama Recreation, and groups in the community have seeked out opportunities with each of us, and there's never been something like this, which is a study to actually coordinate what the needs of the community are. And the needs of the community may not be the same as those organizations that are most local in the community and asserting their needs. And so in light of that conversation with respect to the two usage agreements that were brought to FF&T, the usage agreement for sharing the tennis courts is Stelly Secondary. If we had received this letter earlier, it's probably not something that we would have brought forward to the committee. And the reason for it is because it's proposing specific usage of the tennis courts for pickleball in the evenings and in the weekends, and for pretty extensive hours. And so A concern would be that we go through this study and we participate on this steering committee with Panorama Recreation, which they've invited us to do so. And we identify that in fact, there's a different need for those tennis courts. Maybe tennis, maybe pickleball. And so it's one where both the director of WUM and I have thought, this is kind of a cause for pause on that particular agreement. I think the usage agreement for Parkland Secondary is different because it is a track. It is a pretty narrowly used facility, and Peninsula Track represents and provides opportunities for youth on the peninsula who are interested in track and field. And so it's a much broader access group that is providing an opportunity for children interested and youth interested in track and field for using a facility that is for track and field. And so we don't have the same concerns with the proposed usage agreement with track.
Chair, before I turn to the motions, it may be appropriate to see if trustees have any questions following Mr. Reed's summary.
Trustee Silsby.
Thank you. And the Peninsula Track Club has had an agreement with the school district for how many years? So this is a renewal, really.
Yeah, the Peninsula Track, there's never been a written agreement, but there had been I would say a verbal agreement, and they've been involved in making good use of the track department since the 80s. And so they have a long history with the track department.
I think Trustee Elder, are you interested in trustee informal discussion on whether the motion on the Stellies agreement should even proceed?
I'd like to jump into the first motion and dispose of that one.
Okay.
And then the next one. All right. Given what we've heard and the longstanding partnership with the Track and Field Club and their partnership in the renewal of the facility, I'm going to take the liberty of putting the motion. The committee recommends, and I trustee Elder move that the board approve signing of the attached agreement for Parkland Secondary.
Trustee McMurphy, second. Trustee Van Wel.
Oh, I know, you already seconded, sorry.
I thought you-
Yeah, never mind.
Or I thought you wished to speak to it. Trustees, do you wish to speak to the motion? And I'll put the question on this motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried.
So, Chair, I don't know that we need an informal discussion about the second one. I think the Secretary Treasurer's made a clear, provided a clear overview of the disconnect between the request for a private club to have exclusive use of Stellies tennis courts for pickleball and the opportunity to receive a report from Peninsula Recreation on their needs assessment. And I'm going to take the consideration of the request from Peninsula Pickleball be postponed pending.
Consideration of the.
Consideration of the request, be postponed pending a review of the needs assessment, recreational needs assessment by Peninsula Recreation.
Second. Trustee Vandal. You explained it well, and the Secretary Treasurer has, as you've noted. Trustee Elder, is there anything further you wish to contribute? Trustees, do you wish to discuss this? I'm not seeing any hands at all.
Might have a question.
Trustee McMurphy, that kind of humor is only appropriate at midnight. Thank you. All right, I'll put the question on
Chair.
Trustee Hickman.
With this motion, will a letter be sent to the pickleball club letting them know that we're suspending and why?
Yes.
Thank you.
Susan McMurphy.
All right, well, first, are there any other questions about this motion? Is it clear? Is there any further comment? All in favor? Yes, it was trustee Adams. All in favor? Sorry, I didn't see. Opposed? The motion's carried. Thank you.
Item 4, Sandwich International Student Program homestay fees for 25-26. The committee recommends and I, trustee Elder, move that the board approve increasing the monthly homestay fee from $1,200 per student per month to $1,350 per student per month, effective for the 2025-2026 school year.
Second. Trustee Manuel. Trustee Elder.
I don't feel a need to contribute other than what's been provided by way of briefing materials through committee. I think it's fairly well canvassed as to why this number and what difference it will make.
Yes, thank you. Others? Question, all in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 5 is digital service transformation funding. This to me feels relatively routine, but I think before going into the motion, I'll ask the chair, the secretary treasurer, to give us the Coles Notes version of what's being proposed here.
For homestay?
Sorry, no, the $200,000, the penny brush.
Oh, so you got it. So,
Sorry.
so, last spring, I think around this time, last year, the board approved allocating $500,000 from the contingency reserve to replace the district's phone systems because of the transition away from copper lines by TELUS and because of concerns with the reliability of our existing phone systems and resulting health and safety concerns and other concerns. And so the phone system replacement was commenced in the summertime and it was completed just before Christmas. And then late in the fall, we learned that the ministry was had a grant program and was providing funding for this very thing, transitioning away from copper phone lines. And so Director of Information Angel completed the application and put $200,000 that we were able to allocate towards those costs. And even though the costs had already been incurred, the ministry confirmed that was okay. And so when the board had allocated $500,000 from the contingency reserve, there was a plan that we would repay the contingency reserve out of the annual operating savings from reducing the number of necessary phone lines, which we expect would be kind of $80,000 to $90,000 a year. And so as we have received this funding, it seemed logical that we would use it to repay the contingency reserve at this time.
Are there any questions arising from that? Thank you, Trustee Elder.
Thank you. The committee recommends and I, trustee Elder, move that the board approve the allocation of $200,000 to increase the contingency reserve from $2,300,338 to $2,500,000.
Second, Trustee McMurphy, discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Thank you, Chair. There were 3 items for information that are worth mentioning. The first is that the Student and Family Affordability Fund, which was discussed in committee with materials provided to the committee and through this report to the board, showing the expenditures against that fund over the last school year and this school year, and notice that the proposed or the planned allocation of those funds for 24-25 will be forthcoming in the next few weeks. And I believe provided to the board for information when those are done. Fiscal forecast is provided showing that the bottom right-hand corner, which always interests everybody when it comes to a spreadsheet, an expected year-end contingency of roughly $3.3 million, we'll call it a little less than that. Understanding that that is reduced by $600,000 to $2.7 million by virtue of $600,000 of that contingency being pre-allocated through previous decisions against operating pressures this year and going into the same for next year. And increased by $200,000 per the motion that was just passed, leaving a contingency expectation of $2.9 million for the end of the year. So that information was discussed, as was anything of interest to people in the detailed documents provided by Director Sinaglia, so capably, so constantly keeping us informed of these matters. The third item was a report from Budget Advisory Committee, which really spoke to three major areas. One was, given the $2.9 million contingency and the $900,000 pressure for next year, what ought to be the board's approach to either cutting $900,000 worth of programs and services and retaining the $2.9 million contingency, or spending $900,000 from the contingency, leaving it at $2 million in order to avoid making any cuts for next year, knowing that it would create a higher ongoing structural shortfall, which is problematic, even though it's it would be a good temporary solution. So that's something with which we will be wrestling as a board on May 8th, the final budget deliberation time, as informed by committee the day before and by budget advisory, which is scheduled to meet on May 2nd. And that question of to what extent should the contingency be used to balance operating budget, to offset operating pressures, is really one of the main things out for deliberation right now in all the community consultations that are going on, including students. The second major topic there was the consultation process, which was summarized by the chair in his report tonight, and it said leads us through to budget advisory next Thursday, committee day following 7th, and then not next Tuesday, not next Thursday, is it? Is May 2nd next Thursday?
Yes.
Wow. And then May 7th for committee day and May 8th for the special board meeting, with consideration of all the information flowing from various places through budget advisory to the committee. And the third area of discussion at budget advisory was what to do about the ongoing problem of having to go into contingency to balance or make cuts in the face of growing pressures against the operating fund, particularly related to inflationary pressures. So that becomes a matter of advocacy, and we know that across the provinces it's well and vehemently expressed by boards to government, and we know that they are listening, but they have other pressures as well. Hope they're listening. And unless there are questions about those important items, which are just here for information as they were last week, there may be some questions about those things. But other than that, that report concludes that report.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments for either Trustee Elder or the Secretary Treasurer? Thank you, Trustee Elder. That's very comprehensive. Thank you. There is no policy development report this month, and so we'll proceed with item 13, reports from trustee representatives. And first up is Provincial Councillor Van Waal, reporting on the BC School Trustees Association Annual General Meeting last weekend.
So as the chair indicated in her report, the trustees attended the with was Dream Big, Eat Strong. It started out Thursday afternoon. There was a pre-conference which focused on board governance, boards during bargaining, upcoming elections like behind the scenes, and leading with compassion. I believe Trustee Vandal and Trustee Silzer attended some of those. And Trustee Elder, I apologize, I didn't see. So you may want to comment on those after if you'd like. And then the evening opened up with the keynote speaker, which is Reyes Mengi. And he talked to us about the power of human connections. He has 5 habits of human connection. And I will say that all of the slideshows that were presented in the keynote speakers and in some of the hearing sessions will be on the portal for us as they come in. There are a few on there already. Friday morning, we had a speaker, Ramona Pringle, and she talked to us about it was called Beyond the ABCs. It's AI bots of code preparing for the next generation for a changing world. And she talked about how, how some of these things are working and how we need to help with them and learn from them and not be afraid of the things that are coming with all those different things, the AI and bots and so on. That was followed by an MLA forum. Sonia Firstino, Raksha Singh, and Eleanor Sturko were on stage, and it wasn't a debate, but there was some questions that were proposed, some of them from the board of directors and some from trustees that had sent them in earlier. And they answered the questions about how their what their platform was on it. And it was a really interesting session on that. And that was followed by a student voice session. There were some Indigenous students panel from Britannia Secondary in Vancouver. And what was interesting, so Britannia Secondary is the second oldest school, secondary school built in BC, and it's the oldest school still remaining. It was built in 1908. And these students spoke about their experience at the school as Indigenous youth. And it was very uplifting to listen to them. A lot of them have very big goals, and they're moving on to secondary school or post-secondary school, becoming lawyers, and it was very interesting to listen to. The afternoon session was concurrent learning sessions in various themes like diversity, equity, inclusion, problem solving at the board tables, Indigenous education. And then Saturday was motion day. We went through 34 motions, and a lot of advocacy work went in these motions. A couple of them didn't pass, but most of them did. Most of them did. And that's what I put on that.
So you're extending an invitation to other trustees?
Yeah, absolutely, if they want to share their experience, for sure.
Trustee McMurphy first.
I have a question.
No, I appreciate that.
I'm just wondering about your report of the political panel. Did they offer an explanation as to why the Conservatives weren't represented there?
They did not. They had been asked, but they didn't respond.
They had been asked, yeah, just.
Does anyone else wish to supplement Trustee Van Wyl's report? Trustee Selzer?
I would like to share, just to mention the pre-conference program. And one session in particular called Behind the Scenes Election Day 2024. And the Deputy Minister and ADM of the Ministry of Education and Childcare, Christina Zacharias, and Chloe Nichols were asked questions by Suzanne Hoffman. So this was really interesting in that our board has never experienced, in my time here, I don't know what.
Some of us have been.
That was really good.
Yeah, sorry, no, it's, once the writ is dropped, and between then and when the new government is appointed is called the interregnum period. And it's a time, it's kind of a not a dead zone. It's like the MLAs are no longer MLAs, but the cabinet is still the cabinet. And so it's not a time for school boards to allocate for anything. But it is a time to be finding out what the platforms of the different parties are and finding out, developing relationships, I guess, with the politicians and finding out what their platforms are. And then in terms of advocacy, you have to give the new government, whether it's a returning government or not, a period of time to adjust. So the recommendation of the deputy minister was to not make any pitches to the government until Christmas or after Christmas, so that they're settled. Because apparently, right up until the appointment of the government, nobody knows who the Minister of Education will be or who the deputy will be. In the meantime, though, the ministry thinks that they have a good relationship with superintendents and senior staff, and they say to make sure that the relationships are being maintained by the bureaucrats and school board staff. And then our chair of the BCSTA, Carolyn Brody, asked how to advocate for unfunded inflationary pressures. So Christina Zacharoff said, too late for this budget, of course. When the new government's appointed, they'll be working on the next budget. So you can, then she was asked, well, what about advocacy around funding for common interests, like we're doing with the other school districts, or unfunded inflationary pressures? And the ADM said, having a clear and coordinated ask is very helpful. The more anyone can work on coordinating efforts, the better. The closing sort of summary of things by the deputy was that during this election period, there will be a slowdown, but business will continue and continue to work through the superintendents and BCSTA.
Thank you, Trustee Silver. And speaking to your point, Trustee Silver, about the election and that discussion, as well as to Trustee Mandel's point about the election panel, we recall that's part of the BCSDA's election strategy or election plan. The first was the survey where each board offered its 3 top priorities. The second was this panel that we all saw at the AGM, consisting of the education minister and 2 opposition critics, absent the conservative for whatever reason. And then the focus, as I understand it, will be, as well as another step, on courting the media to make public education an election issue. I think it was the first time that BCSTA had a panel of that sort, at least in my time, and I think ever, probably, because they are emphasizing public education and election readiness for that, so we'll see how that does. Are there other reports from the AGM that trustees you wish to offer? Trustee Elder.
Thank you, Chair. So there's energy building. None of the energy was lost from the senior bureaucrats' response that it's too late to advocate, because there are other ways for government to find funds to support unfunded inflationary pressures without being in the formal budget planning process that goes from November to February, and they say that's it. There will be there are resources for any number of things that continue to be found in various places. So I hope that advocacy continues. I hope it's successful. And I also would love to see, making public education a front and center topic during election season, that it be specific, because the answer from governments of the day has always been record levels of funding. What's your next question? And I think the pressure needs to be politically through the election process on unfunded inflationary pressures. Because they don't have an answer to that, except to say, you know, you're right, we don't fund that, and maybe we should. So I worry that if it's a general, tell us about public education and what it means to you, we won't get anything that relates to what our main advocacy point is, so.
And to your point, not to prolong this, but trustee Elder, to that point, I don't recall that question being put to the panel. It was discussed obviously in the session you attended with trustee Silsford, but I don't recall, unless I'm mistaken.
Not to the panel,
But
but to the senior bureaucrats.
Thank you. Anything else, trustee Hickman?
Thank you, Chair. Actually, the question was put to the panel. It was part of a three-part question. And absent from the answers was anything to do with unfunded inflation. So it was put to them. My ear perked up.
Okay. Thank you. And trustee Vandal?
Thank you. I'd really like to echo what trustee Silser said, and correct me if I'm wrong, trustees who attended. Behind the scenes, in service for us as to how the political system works when there is an election and the writ is drawn and the interregnum limbo time exists. What I found was very interesting. They said all the letters and correspondence from anyone is put in binders, and the binders are on the shelves. And once the election is over, and I'm assuming the party that is keeping the binders wins, they go through those binders, and that information is considered. I didn't know that before. I thought maybe letters rewrite go in cyberspace or something.
Thank you. All right, trustee Van Well, anything else on the AGM?
My report.
Thank you, and thank you, trustees, for your contributions to that. And so we'll move on to the second item under item 13, which is trustee Hickman and the report from Vancouver Island trustees.
Thank you, Chair. So the Vancouver Island trustees met for a breakfast meeting on April 19th. And we had our business meeting. So just a few items that were brought up that I'll share with you. A reminder, the BCPC bargaining survey, which we discussed earlier, needs to be completed by May 17th, pushing it to our committee day on May 7th, which still gives us plenty of time. They also had a reminder to update codes of conduct by end of April. Saanich is in good standing with that, as we were one of the models for other districts to follow. So we don't do anything, and we can pat ourselves on the back. BCSTA will include student voices at all events, so that was something brought forward by the membership, so that's really exciting to hear. I'm scratching the information. Each island district was asked to share what's new and exciting in their area, and Chair Dunford represented Saanich School District and shared the following. He shared that we are working on our collaborative budget development process with our education partners and community initiative, engaging 8 other school districts in similar enrollment and financial circumstances to jointly advocate for the lack of inflation funding. And also that our nature-based childcare center, Sashishit, was opening April 23rd. That concludes my report. However, on a separate note, but still related to Vista, I would like to make the following motion. I, trustee Hickman, move that Saanich School District, in partnership with Victoria and Sault School Districts, work with staff to co-host the 2025 Vista Spring Conference.
Is there a second? Trustee Van Wel, speak to the motion. Trustee.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the rationale for this motion is that we have not hosted a Vista conference since 2012, and it's actually kind of our turn to step up. The idea to co-host is in consideration of the travel distance for other boards, and so it makes sense for the 3 districts to partner on this event as we're in close proximity to each other.
Discussion. Trustee Silza.
Please read the motion again.
I can read that, sure. I, trustee Hickman, move that Saanich School District, in partnership with Victoria and Sauk School Districts, work with staff to co-host the 2025 Vista Spring Conference.
So I think it might make more, well, I would propose that we say that staff explore the possibility of co-hosting the Vista Conference. Because we're, without the other districts doing a similar thing, there's some exploring to be done, in other words. Or offering, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think what you're, if we get to an amendment, it would be taking it back one step. This is, as I read it, basically saying we're committed to doing it and working with the other districts and staff to make it happen. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I think the understanding of Vista is that it is going to happen, that we are going to do it, and what would happen if we don't do it. So I'm thinking probably the best way to deal with this, because it is different from the motion, Trustee Seltzer, is if you propose that as an amendment.
Yes.
And we can deal with it that way. Because it does take us back one step, I think, from what I understand the motion to be. So what would your amendment be again?
It would be that staff explore the possibility of hosting the Spring Vista meeting, hosting the Vista branch meeting in spring 2025.
Okay, is there a seconder for that amendment? Trustee McMurphy?
Well, put me on the list.
Okay, are you seconding?
Yes.
Okay, you're seconding. All right. Now, do you wish to speak further to your amendment, Trustee Sills?
Yes. I think we can only make a motion as to what we're going to try to do. We can't commit any of the other districts. So, and that's the exploring part. So, and I think we need to figure out what the cost of doing it will be. And before we commit and jump into doing it, we need to know some more information about the resources and whether it's possible that we can commit. And that we will only know by senior staff exploring the possibility.
Trustee McMurphy, please.
I just wanted to take another step back and it's through you to Trustee Hickman, if I may. You said there were conversations at Vista.
I actually was not a part of the conversation, trustee Van Well was.
Okay, so have we actually been in touch with Victoria and Sauk about this possibility?
Yes, we have.
Well, we've talked to trustees, the trustees about it, and I know that Sauk was said absolutely they would like to participate with us on it. I mentioned it to Victoria and I said, oh, that sounds good, but so we'll see with them.
Yeah, I agree with the concerns. I think I agree with the concerns that you expressed, Trustee Silzer, which is that we need to be sure of the ground we're standing on, because I don't think we're in a position to host it by ourselves. Or is your motion, Trustee Hickman, that we're gonna go ahead and do it, and if the others come along, that's great, but we're doing it anyway?
I think for
Yes.
permission, maybe, with this discussion, and it's great conversation, that perhaps the motion be changed to read that we move to confirm partnership with Victoria and Sauk school districts and work with staff and once confirmed, work with staff to co-host the 2025 Vista Conference.
Well, we have to deal with one thing at a time,
Okay.
Trustee Hickman, and we have an amendment on the floor to explore. Depending on what happens with that, we could then entertain it with something else. Trustee Elder?
I thank you, Chair. I support the amendment for a couple of reasons. One is a set of reasons that's already been articulated. The other is that I hesitate to have the board pass a motion that commits our staff to work that we haven't talked about. So I think asking staff to work with the board to explore possibilities gives us a chance to see if it's viable. It is our turn, it's the South Island's turn. But what our senior staff see as being something that's achievable given the work that it would create and so on. And I want to have an answer to that as well as an answer to the other districts. So I support the amendment.
Superintendent.
I'd like the trustees to finish, but I do have an operational comment to make to around timing.
All right, well, perhaps trustee Hickman, you can go ahead.
I just would like to see more definition around explore. So is it exploring the agreement with the other districts? Is it exploring financial commitment? Or is it all of those? But I'd like to see that defined in the motion so that we know exactly what we're exploring.
Do either of you, who've been central to this discussion, have any financial information? Mr. Reed, do you have financial information?
I think more of a question when our trustees, when our board participates in Vista, we pay a conference fee. And I'm assuming that conference fee is determined through the budgeted cost of the event. Right. And I imagine for any district hosting, the intention would be that it's cost neutral and that the costs are recovered through that conference fee. Is that correct?
And Vista also has the money that they, because I think we pay $200 a year towards Vista and costs that are, little trinkets and things that will be covered by Vista for that purpose. So it'll be cost neutral, but there's time involved with staff in organizing.
Trustee Hickman?
We did reach out to ask that question specifically, and we're waiting for a response back from the statistic company.
Thank you. Trustee McMurphy?
I would motion to.
That's not debatable. Is there a seconder? Trustee Silver, you're seconding? It's not debatable, trustee. It's a majority vote, isn't it? All right, all in favor of tabling the motion? Opposed? It's defeated, so we'll carry on debating the motion. Where were we? We were done with you. Trustee McMurphy and then trustee Silzer and trustee Vandal on the amendment. On the amendment to explore the end of it. Trustee McMurphy?
I've already spoken on it, if you want to have Mr. the first.
I took it from your reaction, trustee Vandal, that you were not speaking to the amendment, but.
No, I wasn't.
Okay,
Well, I could ask a question anyways.
absolutely.
Thank you. We have no commitment from the other two districts, right, other two boards. And so it's not just financial too, it's are they going to participate in having students involved or workshops? What are they doing? That's then my next question. So back in 2012 when we did it.
In 2012, the three districts cooperated.
That's what we done it before.
It was, yes, it was held at Bear Mountain.
Okay.
I remember that. I'm on the list too, but I can wait if there's another trustee who wishes to speak. At this point, I'm inclined to oppose the amendment for a couple of reasons. One, I'm hearing that this shouldn't be much of a cost at all for this district. There will be some investment from staff for sure. And in addition to that, we've had some expressions of interest from at least Sue. I'm not sure that Victoria's is that concrete. But I have a couple of other concerns. One is that it really is our turn, as Trustee Elder said. It's been 12 years. And the island districts have hosted this disproportionately, and they have to go through the same discussions, absent cooperation perhaps with other districts, that we are about staff time and about potential cost. And it is long overdue that we at least, and hopefully in conjunction with the other two, did this regardless. The other concern I have is that if the tabling motion was defeated, but if we take some time exploring this, time is passing. I think we're talking about March of 2025. If we're going to do this, then we ought to get on with booking things and we ought to get on with coordinating with the other districts. I was told by the chair of Vista that the expectation from the executive, and perhaps you could speak to this better than I if you wish to, Trustee Van Well, is that we would be responsible for the Friday night, showcasing whatever we wanted on the Friday night, wherever this was. And then if Victorian Soup came in as well, they would have the Saturday. I don't know where the business meeting goes. So my perspective is that these are certainly not trivial issues, Trustee Silzer. I respect your concerns here, but I think that we have to move ahead based on the information we have. But that's my perspective. You're still waiting?
Yes, after trustees.
All right, and I'll go to Trustee Silzer.
So for me, it's not just the cost of putting it on, it's like, what are the steps to getting to committing to host a Vista meeting? So, and that would be, so delay it 1 month into May to allow staff to find out, first of all, what implications it would have to staff time, which is the main, that's just being respectful to our staff, our senior staff, and who's expected to actually do the work. So I don't think it will hold, and plus, it's not an individual trustee decision. So at a conference, somebody could say, yeah, that's a great idea, but what about their board? They have to consult with their board and make it, because no one trustee makes a decision for the whole board. So that takes some coordination. And I think that might be part of what staff is involved with, I guess, in contacting the other districts or maybe figuring out with the chair or the ECSTA rep or Vista rep as to the process for putting it all together. So that is just to say, let's take a more measured approach, just get and hear from, I'd really like to hear from the superintendent as to whether there are some initial considerations that we should consider.
Thank you, Trustee Silzer. Seeing no other trustees at this point, I'll turn to you, Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and echoing your concern about timing and logistics. This would not be an insignificant undertaking for staff to organize. As an example, even reserving a hotel with enough rooms is not something that we should really, if we are going to host, we could delay for a month or two. If we were to wait until June, I would be surprised if any hotel could accommodate us at that late time period. This is not just booking a dozen rooms. This is a significant booking, and it could potentially be too late at this point in time for a March Vista event in South Island. That's spring in the South Island when hotels fill up very quickly. So I would anticipate there's two different trains running down the track. I think there needs to be trustee communication with Vista and with the other boards of Victoria and Soup to see if there's interest and agreement. And I think staff could, without a motion, start to explore the possibility with the other senior staff around hosting locations. For instance, we do not have a hotel big enough in the peninsula to host such an event, so it would have to be either Victoria or Soup. And to have staff do some exploring at least as to possibility of booking a facility with conference space and hotel rooms and availability. But I would strongly urge us not to delay. if this is something that the board is interested in pursuing.
Okay, thank you. Anything further before we go to a vote on the amendment to explore as opposed to, I think your language, trustee Hickman, was to work in partnership with the other districts to bring this to fruition. Are we ready to vote on this?
I have a question for clarification. Would,
Yes.
through you to the superintendent, would passing this amendment so that it become an exploration rather than a commitment to proceed mean the kind of delay that worries you? Or would you go ahead anyway?
I would go, honestly, with my concrete sequential brain, I want to go ahead and figure out what's possible out there and put a hold on a number of rooms if we could. We could be working with the executive assistant from Parksville to figure out exactly how many rooms they reserved. And we could be doing some of the logistic work behind the scenes to see if this is even feasible from a physical perspective. And to be honest, it would be a lot of work for staff to do. So the sooner we could have a commitment and understand what that looks like, the sooner we could start to parcel out what that might entail for staff here and in the other jurisdictions.
All right, thank you. I'll put the question on the amendment as proposed by trustee Seltzer. All those in favor of the amendment?
Could you please read that?
Yes.
That staff explore the possibility of hosting the Vista branch meeting in the spring of 2025.
All in favor of the amendment? Opposed? The amendment is defeated. We'll return to discussion on the main motion. Trustee Higgins.
That the Saanich School District, in partnership with Victoria and Sauk School Districts, work with staff to co-host the 2025 Vista Spring Conference.
Is there any further discussion on that motion?
That the Saanich School District, in partnership with Victoria and Sauk School Districts, work with staff to co-host the 2025 Vista Spring Conference.
Yes.
We don't know that Victoria and Sauk are in it for sure, do we? So that motion implies that we know for sure, and we're just asking staff to get on with it. So I have difficulty with that still, sorry.
Trustee Seltzer.
Yeah, I think there's ambiguity because it's our staff is going to work on behalf of those other two school districts.
Are you asking a question?
Yeah, I am. I'm asking, it's Richard.
Do you know with that, trustee? What's the intent of that?
Who's staff?
With all three district staff. If we're co-hosting, it's all three district staff, it's all three districts trustees, it's.
So your expectation is if the motion were carried tonight, our staff would initiate discussions with the other two districts' staffs
Yes.
to try to pull this off.
Yes.
That involves their boards. I haven't decided.
True. Trustee Elder.
I'm comfortable with the motion. I think that it will work itself out without us worrying too much about the specific wording. To quote trustee Wayne Hunter from years ago, I've got one leg in my pajamas. Let's get on.
Now there's an image that's going to be hard to get out of my head.
I haven't heard that one, trustee.
It's a good one.
I can say that Wayne Hunter was the chair at the time of the 2012 conference, so there's precedent for us. But trustees, is there any final discussion? Trustee Hickman?
I just would like to say that we are moving forward in a sense of good faith, that our partners in Sauk and Victoria have indicated their agreement that it's their time to host as well, and that working with us would be a good thing. So I have no sense that they're going to come back and go, whoa, it could happen. But I certainly feel that they're willing to work with us and that it's a good faith measure.
All right, I think we've had full debate. I'm not going to say fulsome because I disagree with the popular use of that word.
I wanted that circled in something.
I don't want to use thorough at all. But we have had thorough discussion. So I'll put the question on trustee Hickman's motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, trustee Hickman.
Thank you, that concludes my report.
All right, and then we have a report from COPAX, and as I recall, trustee Silsby, you and trustee Vandal attended on behalf of the board at the last COPAX meeting.
Yes, Chair, I attended the 11th COPAX meeting. And when I arrived, the superintendent and secretary treasurers were conducting a consultation with COPAC about the revised AP 315 on student injury in schools. And then the meeting adjourned to eat cake, and then they had their AGM. And I told them about my meeting, yeah, it looked like it's very productive. It was really good cake. Brandwood Bakery, whatever Brandwood Bakery is. I haven't got it. It was better than last year's. It did.
Since the meeting, trustee Silsby, did you get to participate on that?
Could you please put your leg in the pajama?
And meeting's over.
All right, anything further, trustee on the subject? Trustee Vandal, you attended remotely, I think.
Sort of.
Sorry.
Do you have anything to add to trustee Silsby?
No, it wasn't their birthday, it had to be.
She did.
But.
Thank you, trustee Silsby.
Virtually wasn't there.
All right, thank you. Before the chair is further insulted, let's move on to trustee Vandal and the Vanwell and the police chief.
Thank you. So I had reported last month that trustee Vandal and I had gone to the orientation session for Police Week. And I just wanted to report this month that I actually attended one of the days. I went on the Wednesday of that week. So it was at Albert Head Cadet Training Center. And it was really interesting. I got to witness, they had what they called sims, so they were simulations of things, and a couple of some of the different simulations that they had were a break and enter with an unfriendly, and then a break and enter with the friendly, and they had they were divided up into groups of 10 students, and then they had 2 police officers, and all of the police officers were volunteering their time, and they were from all throughout Victoria. They were, either police officers or RCMP officers, and the people who were doing the simulations were as well volunteering their time to act. There was also a simulation where it was a daycare center, and this person was passed out in front of the daycare center who had a history of drug abuse, and how the students were, or how they would interact with that person and deal with that person. It was interesting because one of the ones that did, the one with the break and enter with unfriendly, 2 of the students approached this person, and the one girl had this voice, like her voice was just so loud. And afterwards I heard the police officers talking. This girl, when she first started, was so quiet, but it was kind of like, I don't know if you remember the Police Academy, the movie, The Police Academy, the one lady who was like really talks softly, but as soon as she started speaking as a police officer, her voice, and it was just like this. And it was so gratifying to see that this, she was learning. All of the students were having a great time, and they were all excited about what they were doing. And the police officers were so happy to volunteer their time to interact with these with these students. And even if they didn't go on to be in law enforcement at all, they got the opportunity to explore. And I think it was a really great, really great and gratifying to see that. I know that they were, even by then, they were tired. They did a lot. They go from morning until night. No phones, nothing. So it was really a good opportunity to see these students in action. And I did recognize a couple of the students that were from Claremont. I saw them today, but I didn't get a chance to talk to them because they were sort of gone before I could grab them and say, how did it go for the rest of the week? But I'm really glad I had the opportunity to visit and see our students in action. I just wanted to.
Yes, thank you for that. Any questions for Trustee
I
Van?
went to the first orientation.
Trustee
I
Van?
went to the first orientation, all the nights that they brought the parents and the students were fortunate enough to win a spot in this leadership week. And it was a leadership, it's the auspices was a leadership. It's not necessarily just police are doing police activities, but they work on leadership.
Thank you. All right, folks, we're crawling towards the end of the meeting. Taking a breath, and we'll dive into correspondence. There are 5 items. The first is the letter from the Municipal Recreation, which has already been discussed. I don't know that we need to have any further talk about that, but your hands. And then 2 from Pope Pax. One was a letter deeply appreciated by us, I think, to the Minister of Education and Child Care, advocating for funding. And the second was with respect to the presentation by Secretary Treasurer Reid and the Superintendent on the student appeal process at the recent meeting. Is there anything arising with respect to that? And then there are 2 letters one from the City Staff Committee and one from the DPRO Staff Committee with respect to the Health and Wellness Manager Initiative. And perhaps I'll invite either the Superintendent or the Secretary Treasurer to comment on those before we determine what anything we do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll start, and then the Secretary Treasurer has anything to add. Mr. Peterson took me up on my offer through the last committee meeting to meet with him and part of his executive to discuss the health and wellness program. And Director Reid and I went over there the other day to have a more fulsome conversation about what it is and the process and the intent behind it. There were a couple of questions from him and his Vice President who were in attendance. We promised to have more conversation about it, to dispel some of the fear that is apparently out there. Not too sure where that information has come from because that wasn't communicated to the STA. So there's obviously some speculation out there and some misinformation that needs to be continuing to be addressed. There was an email out from my office to the entire district that trustees saw as well too. I know in some conversation out there with some teachers that there is, and other staff as well, not just teachers, but support staff and excluded staff, that there is a appreciation for the intent behind the positions and what it represents in terms of supporting staff in a positive way. And we made a commitment to Mr. Peterson in particular to continue the conversation and to explore the implementation of it as we go forward.
Mr. Reid?
I have nothing to add.
May I ask this, Superintendent, do you see a need for a particular response from the board to this? What would you advise?
If the board felt comfortable to direct the superintendent to write responses to not only these 2, but I believe there's been a 3rd or 4th one that's come in as well too, that I could reach out to the staff committees and offer an opportunity to have further dialogue after some further explanation and correspondence from myself.
Trustees, I've acknowledged receipt of these letters, but I haven't responded obviously on behalf of the board. So I'm in your hands as to what, if anything, you might wish to do. Trustee Vandal?
Thank you. I would like Trustee Edler ever to write a letter, because I think there's a lot of confusion about it. So I think that they need to hear what it's about in print. Because there's a lot of innuendo and rumor out there. And I'm very disappointed that that's what they can see.
Trustee
People
Hickman.
right to know.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were, thank you, trustee Hickman.
I'm wondering if it would be a good idea for you to send a letter to those letters that were specifically addressed to the board, advising that you've requested Superintendent Everyone to follow up specifically with them. And then let Superintendent, would that,
Let's deal with this in an efficient way. Why don't you make that a motion?
okay.
So repeat it, please.
I, Trustee Hickman, move that Chair Dunford respond to letters that have been specifically addressed to the board, advising that he is requesting Superintendent Everyone to respond specifically to each on the matter of the health and staff committee with regards to their concerns
On the health and
on the health
wellness
and wellness
issue.
position.
Is there a seconder to that motion? Trustee Dunwell, you wish to speak to it further, trustee Hickman?
I think it speaks for itself, but thank you, Chair.
Or is it so awkward? Trustee
I just have one
Pelton.
caution with the, or concern, with regard to one word in there, the active word in there, which is direct the superintendent to respond. We know the superintendent's responding anyway. I wouldn't want it to look like he's only doing it because the board directed him to. So I'm wondering if there's a way to frame it that says the board has discussed it and understands that the superintendent will be responding directly to letter writers. Yes, as opposed to directs that the superintendent. And I wonder if that would be a fault to the superintendent.
Yes, so, yeah, the letter from the chair would indicate an understanding that the superintendent would be responding directly. Trustee McMurphy.
Just a question, the superintendent actually has already responded, right?
Yeah.
In email to all staff?
Not to the individual staff committees. If I was addressed personally, then I did respond to one, but I wasn't addressed as the main recipient of the letter, so I did not respond in those cases.
So other than my acknowledgement, trustee McMurphy, there's been no response from the board.
I would need to have a more fulsome response back to the staff.
Right, trustees, is the motion clear? That it would be directing me as chair to respond to these letters on this issue, indicating an understanding that the superintendent will respond to the particular committee. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you, trustee Richard.
Thank you.
Trustee.
One more in consideration of these letters from staff committees, including others that have come subsequent to these two. Within those letters is an expression of concern that we've heard from people, including in our consultation meetings, about evidence that this is cost neutral. And I wonder if, I don't know that I need to put a motion on the floor to that effect, but I'm just hoping that there can be further discussion. I was hope at budget advisory to explain how this is cost neutral before it comes back as a accusatory question in future consultations. I think being preemptive and saying, we heard you last time we asked the question, here's the answer about how this is cost neutral, without it being based on expected savings from replacement costs, because we've also made that promise that that's not how it will be cost neutral. I think that's something that people are wrestling with that bears an explanation. So I'm seeing a nodding head from the Secretary of Treasury. That's something he can or perhaps already plans to do, but I don't think
I don't think, yes, I agree. We don't need that, but there's an understanding here. That's one of the issues that needs to be addressed, sure. Trustee Silzer?
I was wondering if explaining how it's cost neutral is going to be a problem in some way.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Trustee Silver, some of the language being expressed by the staff committees is that the district is attempting to claw back contractually earned sick days. That there would be an attempt to phone sick teachers at home, et cetera. We need to dispel the myth that it's a punitive measure, that it is what we're trying to punish people for using their sick days. It's the purpose of the program is to support staff, not just teachers, but all staff, in being meaningfully and purposefully engaged in their work. And as a natural consequence of that, there may be options that teachers and others haven't explored in terms of their attendance that would result in a natural savings against sick time. But I think putting a focus on the cost, the potential cost savings is not the focus really of the program. The program is to support staff in the recovery and engaging work in a meaningful way. I think the reality is that we anticipate there will be cost savings, but that's not the impetus really behind the program. And I don't think it should be a focus that we zero in on, because that is a concern that has been expressed that is simply an attempt to grab money.
Right, but at the budget, I thought I heard Trustee Elder say that we won't put on the table the reasons it's cost neutral. And get into the financial aspect.
He did indicate that.
And if I may follow, I'm curious about the same thing, how it can be cost neutral without savings coming from replacement costs. I think that's the question that's been put to us by partner reps, and I think it needs answer.
And while it may not be the principal focus of this, there is an explanation, Mr. Reid.
Yeah, so the savings would come from a reduction in replacement costs. But it's not the intention of reducing the legitimate use of sick time in any circumstance, and the intention and focus of the program is not to discourage the use of sick time. It is to support staff in health and wellness, and in particular to support staff that are struggling, and as a result of struggling with their health or struggling, including struggling with their mental health, are having challenges at work and having challenges with attendance. And these programs, when they're done right, do result in improvements in attendance, and they do result in a reduction in the usage of sick time benefits.
I'd like to move on shortly. I think we've kind of canvassed the correspondence to death, but not to death, but third.
One leg in his pajamas.
We wish them the best. Trustee Vandal, you had a final point.
Just a thing to add on, Secretary Treasurer Reid, and is supporting health. This is about supporting their health. And I'm so disappointed that this is lost in this whole health and wellness position.
And I think we can expect the Secretary Treasurer and the Superintendent to reinforce that correspondence. Thank you, Trustee. All right, let's move on from the correspondence, please, to our second question period. If there are questions from partner group representatives or any public attendance. And seeing none, we'll move on to item 17, which is the Administrative Procedure 315. I'll turn to Superintendent Everwing to introduce that.
Thank you very much. This is a brand new administrative procedure. This is one that we didn't have in print, but just through common practice. This refers, this administrative procedure, and it's my mistake, the word draft shouldn't be there because this is This has gone out for consultation. We met with COPAX last month about this. We've been talking to administrators about this. This is putting down in words what we are currently doing in our schools. And it really separates out minor incidents with more major ones so that there's a clear understanding. Minor are those that don't require medical attention, and medical attention is most appropriately defined as that attention requiring services of a medical professional. So a student comes in, for example, from the outside with a little skinned knee because they've fallen in the playground. That would not be medical attention. That would be a minor injury that they would get an ice pack and perhaps go back to class or sit in the first aid room for a little bit. The number of bumps and bruises, especially at elementary, are significant. But this gives clarity to both staff and to parents as to when they will be contacted and what the protocols are for around transportation of a child that might require some significant medical intervention, whether that be an ambulance or a hospital. It also clearly outlines the role of the principal that is defined in the School Act in terms of roles and responsibilities. Principals and teachers by the School Act and through Supreme Court decision are given the status of ennobled parentis, which means acting in a prudent and fair way, as a prudent and fair parent would do. Associate Director Ryan has written this with the help of myself and with school administration, following what has been found in other school districts. Not every school district has a student injury AP. This one is actually a little bit more comprehensive than some of the other ones that are out there. We've been a bit more descriptive on purpose to make sure that there is clarity of expectations out there. So this is coming to the board as an information item. This doesn't need to be approved by the board, but I'm certainly able and willing to answer questions at this time, of course, if there are any.
Are there any questions or comments from the superintendent on this? Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you.
That would conclude that.
That's it. Thank you very much.
for your explanation. And trustees, that then completes the agenda. Is there any objection to adjourning at this time? No? I see agreement. And thank you for your participation, for your thoughtfulness, and for your contributions. Thank you, partners, for attending with us and observing our business as well this evening. Good night. We are adjourned.
Thanks, Paul, that was great.
It's a great article, wasn't it? Good night, Carly. Thank you.